everyone, and welcome back to another Ableton tutorial. It is lovely to have you here. A big shout to everyone liking, commenting, subscribing on YouTube, and a huge multitudes, boatloads, truckloads of thanks to these awesome folks whose name are before your eyes right now, supporting over on Patreon. The support on Patreon really does help me keep making this kind of content, keep sharing the kind of things that I'm exploring. And of course, there's all kinds of goodies, like all the sets that I make in these tutorials are available on Patreon. Instrument racks, effects racks, MIDI FX racks, and of course a bunch of sample packs and that sort of stuff as well. And some exclusive goodies here and there. So big thanks to everyone supporting over on Patreon. Right, what are we looking at today? Well, the idea for today's tutorial actually came from a question over on Patreon. A couple of folks over there asking if I could go for a bit of a deep dive into Ableton's MIDI effects. I explore Ableton's MIDI effects a lot on this channel, and I thought, yeah, that's actually a really nice idea, because a lot of my explorations come from thinking, well, this MIDI effect can do this thing, and this other MIDI effect can do this thing, and what happens if we combine them? And so I thought, let's take a look at all of the things that I've discovered that Ableton's MIDI effects can do. Of course, there's probably a whole bunch more that I haven't discovered. If you've discovered cool stuff, please pop comments below. Would love to find out new stuff about these effects as well. The track that you can hear in the background right now comes from an album that I made earlier this year. The album's called Non-Determinative Outcomes. We're not going to be remaking this track today. I just wanted something nice to talk over for this introduction, but I did make a tutorial on a lot of the techniques in this track. Link in the description below if you want to check that out. And of course, it uses a lot of these techniques about exploring these MIDI tools, so it felt like it kind of fits. Right. Before we start looking at any individual MIDI effects, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I think about MIDI. And I think of MIDI as little packets of information traveling along. We can generate a packet of information by pressing a note on a MIDI keyboard. We can generate a packet of information by programming in a MIDI clip. We can even use audio to trigger a little packet of MIDI information. I made a video about that. Another link in the description below if you want to check that out. And these little packets of information, they contain information to do with velocity and pitch and MPE information such as pressure and slide. We can use MIDI effects to alter these little packets of information in certain ways, and then those little packets of information arrive at their destination, and perhaps that's a synthesizer, and that synthesizer interprets those little packets of information. It says, okay, this packet says note this and velocity that, and responds accordingly. Or we can send that MIDI information to visuals programs like Touch Designer. A lot of the way that I made the visuals for my album was sending MIDI information from Ableton into Touch Designer, and Touch Designer then interpreting those things of pitch and velocity and doing things with that. So I like to think of MIDI as little packets of information traveling along. We use MIDI effects to change those little packets of information, and then those packets of information arrive at their destination. So with that in mind, today we're going to look at Ableton's, I think of them as the utilities MIDI effects. We're going to look at note length, we're going to look at note echo, we're going to look at pitch, we're going to look at random, we're going to look at scale, and we're going to look at velocity. I'm not going to dive into things like the expression control or sequences or arpeggiator and stuff today. If you'd like me to make a video on those ones also, please comment below. Let's press stop on this. Let's start by bringing in a brand new MIDI channel, Shift-Command-T to bring in a brand new MIDI channel. And I'm just going to use a totally stock sound for this. I'm going to go to Instruments. We're going to go to Wavetable. Just going to drag that in there. I'm going to change one thing. I'm going to go to the MIDI tab here and make this very velocity sensitive. Velocity to amplitude, turning that right up, because a lot of these devices are also changing the velocity, and we want to be able to hear what's going on there. In front of this, I'm going to bring in a MIDI effect called MIDI Monitor. Now, this is not going to change the MIDI information at all. All it's going to do is analyze it and tell us what it is doing. So I have my computer keyboard enabled up here, and I'm going to turn the input monitor on here. So now I can press a note on my computer keyboard. This is telling me what note, and you can see that I'm holding it down, and we can hear that coming out of the wavetable. And when I let go, it stops. So that's how this MIDI monitor is working. That's how this wavetable is working. Right, let's begin to explore some devices. Now, what I'm actually going to do is bring in another MIDI monitor in here, and we're going to drop our MIDI devices in here, in between the two MIDI monitors, so that we can monitor the effect that these MIDI devices are having. Now, MIDI devices, MIDI effects, they always need to go before the synthesizer. I talked about them being little packets of information, and the packet of information comes in here, gets monitored, analyzed by the MIDI monitor, and that's happening then twice, and then that little packet of information arrives at the wavetable. So we want to be altering these packets of information on their course. So let's start by looking at the note length. length, and let's drag that in here. So we can see immediately if I'm pressing down here and I'm holding a note, it's stopped over here, and it stopped over here after 100 milliseconds. So very simply, as the name would suggest, we can change this. And again, you can see the note length being held over here for now 588 milliseconds. And so the note length out, it has absolutely no relationship to the note length in. I can play a super short note in, and it still generates a note of 588 milliseconds. I can play a super long note, and it still only generates a note of 588 milliseconds. So it's a way of effectively quantizing, I guess, how long the notes coming in are. And of course, we can grid it. We can make it quarter notes or all the way up to, 64th, 0. I'm going to keep it on milliseconds for now. This dial here, the gate device, is connected with the length here. And effectively, it's a multiplier. So when it's at 100%, it's going to generate a note of exactly 478 milliseconds long. If I shift this up to 200%, it's going to generate a note twice that long, which I'm not going to try and do the maths, but let's see. So we have, you can see it stopped. Now this is going to be twice as long. And now if I make it down all the way down here, it's going to be super short. Yeah. So you can see how the gate is connected with the length here. So now let's move on to some of these other buttons and dials up here. First of all, let's start with the latch. Now what latch is going to do, I think of it kind of like a sustain pedal on a piano. When I play an incoming note, no matter how long that note is, it's going to hold this note indefinitely. You can see the note being held indefinitely there. And it's going to do that until I play another note. And now it's going to hold that note indefinitely until I either play another note or I turn latch off here. So latch functions like that. Now, this little button here is also super interesting, the note on or note off. And this is when is this note length device going to trigger the output note. At the moment, set to note on, you can see it's triggering the output note as soon as I press over here. If we switch it to note off, effectively it waits. It waits and waits and waits until I let go. And then it triggers the note at 478 milliseconds long. Now, we have these three dials here are only enabled when note off is enabled. And why is that? Well, this middle dial here is connected with velocity. And what it says at the moment is it's going to take 60 seconds for the input velocity to decay to 0. And then it is going to, when I let go of the note, it's going to generate a note, because it's set to note off, it's going to generate a note at whatever the decayed velocity is. So up at 60, we're going to have to wait a long time for that to change. But if I bring this down to something more like, bring it down to 3.3 seconds now. So if I play a note super short, we're going to see the velocity at 100. Immediately, that velocity is going to start decaying. It's going to take 3.3 seconds to get to 0. And then this output here is going to be a note of that new velocity. So I'm holding it, and we can hear that was quite lower velocity than if I turn this off. If I bring this down to be a short here, we're going to get almost no velocity because it takes no time at all for it to decay down to 0. Up at 5.74 seconds. And we can hear that the longer I'm holding the note down, the less velocity the output note has. Shorter notes, higher velocity. Longer notes, less velocity. This dial up here, relative velocity, takes a sort of aggregate of the input velocity, 100 here, and the decayed velocity. So up at 50%, it sort of does, it does an average of the input velocity and the decayed velocity. That's how that works. It's going to be really hard for me to sort of really demonstrate that. I hope that I've explained that clearly. Let's set that back down to 0. And the key scale down here is to do with the output velocity being in relationship to the higher or lower notes. So with key scale up at 1, then the higher the note, the higher the velocity, and the lower the note, the lower the velocity. So let's play a high note, loud velocity, lower note, quiet velocity, and in the other way, it does the opposite to that. So that's everything that I found the note length device can do. I've explored, especially stuff to do with latch and randomizing lengths here. Another cool thing you can do with the note off is if I group this, Command G, open up the chains here, right click, create a dry chain. So this is now just going to let the incoming packet of information straight through. But this is going to say, wait until the note ends, and then output the velocity decayed note. So Oh, let's come back up into an audible range. So the longer I hold the note, the quieter the second, the quieter the sort of echo note is, which is a really nice way of turning length of notes into velocities of notes. It's a super nice little thing that this note length device can do. Right, that's kind of everything I discovered with the note length device. If you've discovered more stuff, comment below, please. Right, let's delete that. Let's move on. Let's look at the note echo device. So the note echo device, as the name suggests, is kind of like a delay. Like we put an audio delay after a synth or after a sound. This does the same thing, the same sort of thing, but with MIDI. So if I play a note now, you'll see it slowly decaying. Well, you hear it slowly decaying, and you can see the velocity decaying here as well. We have time here, so this is when it's in sync mode. This is the number of 16th notes. So what's happening now is it's letting the input go straight through, then it's waiting 2 16th notes, and then it's generating a note out, and then it's taking that note out and putting it back in. It's waiting another 2 16th notes, and then it's generating another note out, and so forth, according to the feedback. So if I turn the feedback up, we're going to get more notes. It's going to take longer for the velocity to approach 0. And if I turn the feedback down, we're going to get less notes. Going to take longer. If I turn the feedback all the way down to 0%, we're just going to get 1 note, which is also super nice. Now, if I turn this input from through to mute, it's not going to let the original note through, but it's still going to wait 2 16th notes and then output a note. So we can see the input note here. Wait, output. If we set this to 4 16ths. So I like to kind of think of this in this mode as kind of a bit like a holding bay. It sort of lets the MIDI note come in, and then it says, yeah, just wait a bit, and then output that MIDI note. I used this a lot in a recent tutorial about Generative Iterative Ambient, a bunch of note echoes doing this kind of all in a row to create sort of MIDI loops, beat repeat, but make it MIDI kind of a thing. Right, let's keep looking through. Of course, we can have sync on and off, so we can have milliseconds, or we can be clocked to the grid with the note echo. Let's look at what this does. Pitch. So let's bring a bit more feedback in, and let's set the pitch to one semitone. Now what this is going to do is each output MIDI note is going to be transposed by 1 semitone. Super nice. Let's let the input back through. Which is super nice. If we change this to 2 semitones, we're going to feel like we're in a dream. Oh, let's make this shorter. Then it will really feel like we're in a dream. Nice little whole tone scale going up there. Now, this delay here is connected with velocity. So this is how much of the inputting velocity, so this is the 100%, is sent into the note echo. So we can already make it, the output velocity is significantly less than the input velocity, and that output velocity is then going to be slowly decayed out with the feedback as well. So let's set the input to quite low. So we're going to get the first note coming through. That's the input. That's going to be at velocity 100. And then it's going to wait 2 16th notes, and then it's going to output a note 2 semitones above, but with much less velocity. So I kind of think of this as a little bit like a dry wet. So this is, yeah, a bit like a dry wet for the MIDI. Now, over here, we have some MPE enabled stuff as well. And if we turn that on, these percentages here effectively do the same thing as this delay here, but to the MPE information. So for instance, if you're using an MPE keyboard and you've got the pressure connected with a filter cutoff, so you press a note and it goes wow with the pressure there, the delay is going to make each iteration of that slightly less on the pressure according to this percentage here. So you can get notes that not only sort of echo and fade out, but then each iteration also doesn't have quite as much modulation on it as well. A super nice feature of the Note Echo device. So that's everything that I figured out that the Note Echo can do. If you figured out more stuff, comment below, please. Let's move on. Let's look at the pitch device and what the pitch device can do. So at its base level, of course, the pitch transposes the incoming MIDI note. So, of course, we can input a note here, we can transpose it up, and we can see that the incoming note is being transposed up by 1 semitone, exactly as you'd expect. These 2 buttons here and this range here allows me to very quickly put it up or down by an octave or by whatever range is in here. So if I put this to 2 semitones, then we can very quickly go up. Let's set all of these back to default settings. This is super nice. You can connect these buttons to, perhaps a MIDI controller or to an LFO or something like that, and have the octave of the MIDI notes that you're inputting sort of change quite quickly, which is super nice. Now we have this range section down here, and this range section is connected with the modes. So let's set a range. Let's set the range to be C3 and going up 11 semitones. So that's then going to go up to B3. Now we have 3 different modes here. So if I'm inputting notes inside that octave, it's going to let them through. With the block mode, it's basically just going to get rid of any notes that are outside that range. So if I play some higher notes, we can see playing higher notes here, they're outside of the range. So this pitch device is saying effectively, yeah, get rid of that junk. We're not interested in that. I kind of think of this a lot like if we were to group it or group another MIDI device and use the key here and to constrain the range like here. Effectively, that's what we're doing with this pitch device set to block mode. I really like that because it saves me having to put things into a group when I want to have that effect. This pitch device can do it kind of super simply, super quickly. It keeps things nice and streamlined. In fold mode, what it does is it takes any notes that are outside of this range and it folds them to be back in this range. So, input C3, we're getting output. None of those notes are being affected. But if I input notes outside of this range, so we can see F4 here, but we can see that it's outputting F3. So what it does is it takes any note that is outside of this range here, and it effectively transposes it back into that range, which is super nice if you're generating a lot of notes, MIDI notes in here that are sort of all over the frequency spectrum, all over the pitch spectrum, sorry, and you're wanting those to sort of actually be within quite a confined range. And what limit does, limit functions exactly like an audio limiter, but for the MIDI information. So any notes that are outside of these range, it squashes it to be either the top or the bottom note of that range. So here you can see me inputting a D4. It's outside of the range. It's outputting a B3, which is the highest note in the range. No matter what note I play above the range, you can see I'm playing all kinds of notes up here. It's outputting a B3. And the same thing if I go underneath the range. It makes it the lowest note. So effectively, it's limiting them. So fold and limit have a similar kind of function in that it says we want all of the incoming notes to actually do something. Fold transposes them, keeps the notes the same. Limit clearly squashes those notes. And when we're on block mode, it says, no, we're not interested in those notes at all. So that's what I've discovered with the MIDI pitch device. Let's keep moving on. Let's look at the random device in here. So I'm going to bring this in here. Now, random is also controlling the pitch. It's not doing anything with any other of these little bits of information. There are these little packets traveling along on their way to the synthesizer. But let's take a look at what we can do. So the chance here is the chance that this little device is going to actually do anything. So with chance at 0, let's bring this back up here. No matter what I'm doing with these other controls here, with chance at 0, absolutely nothing is going to change because the chance of this device doing anything is well, it's 0. It's not going to do anything. These two dials here, interval and choices, are connected with each other. The best way to describe this is to show you, but the interval is the interval between the choices. So with the interval set at 1 and the choices set at 1, the interval here is going to be a half step and it's only giving us one choice. And let's set the chance to 50%. So 50% of the time we're going to get the incoming note, and 50% of the time it's going to alter that note by a possibility of one half step, one semitone if you like, and the number of choices is going to be 1. So we're either going to get a C or a C sharp. Oh, I've got this set to go sub. Let's put this back to add. So we're either going to get a C or a C sharp coming out. If I turn the choices here up to 2, it's then going to say, okay, we're going to have potentially 2 half-step choices. So we're going to have either a C sharp, or a D. C, the incoming note, and 2 choices based on the interval here. If I bring the choices back down to 1 and the interval up to 2, we're going to get potentially this note or this note, a C or a D. But now if I bring these choices up to, let's go for 3. So now we're going to get either the incoming note or 3 choices all at our half steps. We're either going to get a D, an E, or an F sharp. hasn't made it up to the F sharp yet, but you see how that's working. If we leave it at choices 3 and interval 1, then we're going to get this note, this note, this note, or this note. Super nice. We can put the interval up to, you know, fifths. So you can see we're getting choices of 3 different potential five semitone steps. Now, over on this side, we've got 2 things that we can change. We can make this alternate. So what that means is when it's set to random, let's set this back to this. Set to random, it's going to randomly choose any of these notes. Set to alternate. The random notes are being stepped up. So if I change this to 100%, you can see it's stepping through these 3 choices. So this function is kind of a bit like an incremental thing. So I go change choices up to 6. So I like this incrementalness that we can bring in when we bring in alternate instead of random in there as well. Now, this down here affects whether these notes are going to be added to the original note. So then only notes that are above. Only notes that are below the original note. Or notes that can go either above or below the original note. So that's the random device. Let's keep moving on. Let's look at the scale device. And to do this, I'm going to leave the random device in, and I'm going to bring in a scale device in here. Now, a scale device effectively quantizes all of the incoming MIDI notes. So again, we're only dealing with pitch here. We're not dealing with velocity at all. The scale device quantizes all of those notes to be within a specific scale. So we have a bunch of preset scales here. For instance, we can go for C major. No matter what random note is generated, this scale device is going to squash that to be within C major. Super nice. We have a whole bunch of really interesting scales here. Some of these are Indonesian scales. Some of them are sort of more Eastern European scales. We've got all of the major modes here as well. And I really enjoyed the Messiaen scales as well. Right, let's keep moving through this device. So we have a processed range here. So what this allows us to do is it allows us to control what incoming MIDI notes are going to be quantized. So effectively, this is also a bit like putting this into a group like this, and going to the key constraint here and sort of constraining that, and then putting another dry chain like that and going like that and saying these notes are not going to be quantized, these notes are going to be quantized. I'm going to undo that and look at exactly what I mean by that. So let's say we set this lowest to be C3, so that's going to be like this. So any notes that are above C3, this is going to quantize them into C major. So I'm pressing notes. So any note that is being random above C3, it quantizes it into C major. But we can see that this note being generated by the random chance in here, so which was an A sharp. I'll put this in here. Actually, let's bring another MIDI monitor in here so we can see what's happening. So it's above C3, it's being quantized into C major. It's above C3, it's being quantized into C major. Below C3, it's not being quantized, and we can see that this G sharp, or A flat, if you like to call it that, is in fact not in the scale of C major. So it's letting the note go through, but it's not quantizing it. So this range here allows us to decide which particular incoming notes the quantization is applied to. And we have a transpose button here, and this transposes the incoming MIDI notes as well. So it's affecting the notes that are coming in, not the notes that are going out. Okay, that's everything that I figured out to do with the scale device. If you figured out more stuff, please comment below. Let's delete those and let's bring in the velocity device. Let's look at the velocity device. So let's bring this in here. I'm going to start over here. So this allows us to set the potential output range, and we can see this represented in a little graph over here. So no matter how high my input velocity is here, the maximum output velocity is now going to be 55. So we can see the input was 100, the output velocity is 43. That's because when we go across here to 100 on the input, we go up here to the chart and we get an output velocity of 55. If I increase this a bit, we're going to get a slightly higher velocity output here. 54, That's because we go over to 100 now, and the output here is 54. Likewise, we can do the same thing with the low output. So this is now going to increase. So it's going to be 100 on the input. So this is going to output probably around 110. 113. There we go. That's how these two dials work. The drive here affects, you can see what's happening with that line. So what this means is that with a higher drive, even super low velocity notes, so this would be a velocity of, let's say, around 30 or 40, the output is going to be sort of around 60. But as we get into higher velocity notes, they become much closer to their input velocity. So the drive is a little bit different to sort of just raising the output like this. It sort of gives us a range, a curve. It gives us exactly a curve. You can see what's happening. This little button here allows us to sort of squash notes towards the middle or stretch them out towards the extremes. So when we go like this in negative values, we can see that these values are all kind of being squashed towards the middle. So a low value here gets increased to a higher output value, whereas a high output value here gets decreased to a lower input value. When we go like this, it squashes all of the values to the outer extremes. So a lower value is really made much lower and a higher value is really made much higher, but we still have this cross point in the middle. So this allows us to sort of really, change the nature or change we get super similar notes, super varied notes. And here we have, we can randomize the velocity. So you can see this sort of, this gray bar, is it gray? This gray bar appearing. So that if my incoming note is 100, the outcoming note is going to be also 100, but within a potential range of probably that's 75 through to 120. So 77, 111. So you can see here it randomizing the output velocity there. Let's bring that back down to 0. Now, we have three different modes for the velocity plugin here. And we have clip mode, we have gate mode, and we have fixed mode. And this is all to do with this range here, which is the input range. So what clip mode is going to do is it's going to take any velocities that are outside the input range and squash them to be within the input range. So if I bring this down to 69 there, we can see the input velocity is at 100. And it's clipped that note to be the maximum velocity. If I bring it back and all the way up, we get no clipping. Here we can see again, it's clipped that note. It's at 100 because I'm down at 98 here. It's effectively maximized, limited that velocity, and no matter where I put this now. But as soon as I get past 100, we can see it now letting those velocities through. Now, when we put this to gate mode, anything that's outside this velocity range is just going to be ignored. So if I bring this down, we've got velocity 100, but it's saying, no, we're not interested in you. You're outside the velocity range. You're too loud. Just chill out, man. Just chill out a bit. So I think of that again, if we were to group this, Command G, and open up this chain here, this is a bit like using this velocity constraint device here. So again, it's another way of sort of grouping effects and using those chain selector stuff without having to do that. In fixed mode, we just get a fixed output velocity. No matter what the input velocity is, we get a fixed output here. So fixed mode I find really nice to generate velocity sequencing. No matter what the input velocity is, we can sort of sequence this, perhaps using an LFO, perhaps using a sequencer even, or perhaps using a shaper MIDI or something like this, so that the output note is always whatever we decide it to be. It's a fixed value. So that's a bit of a deep dive into Ableton's, what I think of as Ableton's utility MIDI effects. That's sort of all of the things that I've discovered that they can do. If you found more stuff, please pop a link in the description below. But I find it really interesting then when you think of how can I combine these things. So for instance, we looked at the note length and we looked at how the new note length can trigger a note when a note is depressed, when a note is off as opposed to on. So for instance, if we change that to note off and let's group this and let's combine this with some stuff. So let's right click, create a chain here. This is going to be our dry chain. So that's going to let the incoming MIDI note through. But then this is now going to generate a new MIDI note. Let's put some decay on it here so that it's going to be a bit quieter. And let's make the new MIDI note really quite short. So this is now, we can have a super long note coming through. But then as soon as I let go, it's going to generate a really short note. And that short note is going to have decayed velocity. And in fact, I'm going to go halfway between so that I don't have to worry about playing notes that are less than 3.3 seconds long. And let's add a random device after this. And let's just say we want it to potentially play a note that is a fifth. So we're going to go 7 semitones, and we're going to go choices 1, and we're going to get chance to 100. So now 100% of the time, each time this random device receives a MIDI note, it's going to play a note a fifth above. But that's only going to happen when I let go of the incoming MIDI note. So still holding it down, or I can do it super short. So already there, I'm thinking, oh, this is actually quite an interesting little chain, quite an interesting little sequence of events that happens. From me just pressing one note, I get 2 notes, and those 2 notes are kind of interesting. What happens if we make this 5, and let's make this bi? Super interesting. Okay, now what happens if we add a note echo after that? So this is now going to just echo the output of this random device in here. Let's leave it at all this. Let's leave through on as well. Yeah, let's just leave it. Oh, let's turn this down a little bit as well. This is actually a super nice thing to be happening. But if we were to change the order of these things, so let's put the random after the note echo now. So now this random device is going to be generating a new note each time it receives a little packet of MIDI information. So that's going to be each time the note echo generates an echo. Which is super nice. So this was a little bit of a deep dive into some of these MIDI effects. I hope you got something from this. I hope you sort of enjoyed this bit of a deep dive into everything that I found that these effects can do, and have found some inspiration to start thinking, oh yeah, what happens if I combine this effect with this effect? Would love to hear and see what you guys are all exploring. So please drop comments below if you've tried certain combinations of effects and really enjoyed the way that it's come out. Thank you very much for being here today. It's been fun diving into this stuff. Big shout out YouTube gang, big shout out Patreon gang. I'll see you next time.